Welcome to Career Practitioner Conversations. This podcast is presented by the National Career Development Association. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Melissa Venable, NCDA Director of Professional Development, and I'm here today with LaChish Rigg and Blanca Rosales-Ahn for a conversation about representation in the workplace. LaChish is the Chief Executive Officer of LJR Training and Coaching, and Blanca is the founder and executive director of BRAHN Career Educational Consulting Services. So thank you both for being here and joining the NCDA podcast. LaChish, I will turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Melissa, for having us. So grateful in a spirit of gratitude be here for another episode. And I am excited for this conversation with my dear buddy, Blanca Rosales-Ahn. And so, Blanca, why don't you go ahead and tell the people a little bit about you before we dive into any questions?
Oh, okay. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much, LaChish, Melissa, and NCDA for providing this space and this great opportunity for us to talk about such an important topic that we deal with on an everyday basis, right? LaChish and I do go back over 10 years. I've had such an amazing trajectory in terms of my career. I've been blessed to have been in higher education, the healthcare field, business, and more recently in education and higher education. I feel very blessed to be here with you today, and I look forward to our conversation, which I think is, again, so very timely and so very important.
Yes. Oh, Blanca, I'm so happy you're here. As you mentioned, we've worked together for quite some time, so it's not surprising that we will continue to work together now and in the future. So stay tuned for all the work that Blanca and I will continue to do. So, Blanca, as the topic is representation in the workplace, talk to the listeners about what does representation look like in the workplace?
Well, I've been around quite a bit and in different sectors as well. And a lot of people, the perception and the definitions are out there, as you know. But to me, and I see it, diversity, representation is so crucial to the core of any organization, whether you're in government, nonprofit, or anywhere, right? It's about ensuring that all employees from all backgrounds have access to opportunities, right? Decision-making roles, right? It's very important that we're not just occupying a seat at the table, but rather we have our voices heard and respected and acted upon, right? Because there's a huge difference in terms of if you give your opinion and nothing gets done about it, a lot of times, a lot of people, we're collecting data. We're collecting data. Well, it's great, but what are you doing with the data? Are you following through? Are you making sure that voices are being heard and acted upon? Right. So, I mean, there's so many different definitions of representation, as we know, but the true core of it, and it's very important to understand that we need to value different perspectives. We need to not just value, but respect them, right? And our lived experiences, because we all come from all different walks of lives.
Right, absolutely. No, I'm hearing so many great things from what you're saying. You talk about voices being heard. And so, voices of those who are of varying races and cultures. And, so when I'm listening to you and you talk about data, which is like everybody's like data driven and data. So if the data, speaks to the need to have XYZ, it's important for the decision makers to listen to that, particularly in diversifying the workforce and having people that work there know that they can have opportunities for growth because there are other people that are in those spaces. So that's kind of what I'm hearing. And so when we think about the workplace, and you kind of touched on this, but like, why does representation even matter? Like, why does it matter to see someone if you are Latina or if you are African American or just, from the diaspora, being Black and, African, no matter where country you are, or Asian, or insert any other particular culture or race or what have you. Why does it matter to see people like yourself, particularly in positions of leadership or what have you? Why does that even matter?
There's a lot of reasons why it matters, right?
Yes.
But my own personal one, I think it's about strengthening workplace culture. I think it's
Mm,
very important to foster that representation, that innovation, and it creates success within the company. Time and time again, when you look at data, their data has shown that when there is more of a ethnic and cultural diversity within companies, the companies are more likely to outperform profitability. And you can look that up
mm,
anywhere and it will show. It's very interesting. And it also, in terms of you, when other people see people of their own background and see them in even leadership positions, it validates their ambition, right? In
mm,
terms of, wow, she did it. She was able to do that and more. Well, I can potentially do it. And it increases confidence within our professionals and our new incoming professionals, right? To see, wow, this is great. Quite honestly, when I was in school, I didn't have too many Latina professors um, in K through 12 or even in higher education when we're going way back. I'm not going to date myself, but certainly, but it's really interesting that nowadays you see more of that. So there has been some there has been some inclusion, there's been some increase, but I honestly, for the amount of diversity that we have, I don't really think it's enough yet.
yeah, progress yet to be made. But I am hearing that when there is some representation culturally, racially, what have you, there's an attainability. Like I'm hearing you say that someone can say, well, I can do that. I love that. We see someone in a space that we want to be in, whether it's a leader or in a particular type of occupation. Like, well, if that Latina is doing it, then I can do it. If that Black individual, African American, Caribbean, what have you, is doing it, then I can do it. And the list goes on. So I hear attainability. And I also hear you mentioning that along your journey, academic and career, that there were not always people who were Latina that you could look to who represented you. And so speak about that. Like how did that make you feel and what propelled you to still move forward, even though you didn't have people that looked like you, but you still were sort of on this career journey?
Very interesting in my 25 plus years of experience and again in very diverse areas. Um, representation or the lack of, actually, in
Mm,
many cases for me, has shaped my careers in profound ways. Because again, when I did find someone that looked like me, that was a Latina like me, and it actually helped me and it motivated me and empowered me to say, wow, okay, again, going back to what we said before, it definitely gave me some empowerment for me to say, I could do this and I could probably do even more if she was able to, right? So it was very early on in my career, I found myself as being the one, if not one of the few ones,
right.
Latina in leadership spaces, because, and
Mhm.
to this day, there's a lot of, I mean, we do, again, we've made progress. I'm not saying we haven't, but
Right.
I honestly think for the amount of people that we have in the United States, there's wherever you go, when you look at the demographics of a company, for example, right, and you see the demographics, because especially when I was, in higher education as a student, I was like, wow, we have a lot of Latinos in this college. It was a minority college, and it was very interesting because there was only like one for the whole university. And I was like, wow, that's actually like really, somebody needs to do something about this, right?
Right.
Seeing strong, successful women of color, right, in leadership roles reassured me that my ambition was valid and achievable because, well, again, if they can do it, I can do it too, right? Um,
Yeah.
when it was lacking, I had to advocate for myself, right? Build my own networks, which I've done throughout the years, and seek out mentors who understood my journey, because people are like, well, a journey, everybody has, same career journeys. Well, not really, not really.
Right.
Or there are different struggles, there are different challenges and it's always very nice to be able to have that person to go to that
Mm,
knows where you're coming from. And
yeah.
again, I do, that's why I'm such a huge advocate of mentoring, advocacy, and leadership development today. That's what actually inspired me even more so to do what I do with my clients, with my students, with people around me, as you know.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. I
Mhm.
love that. And it sounds like knowing what it's like to not always have someone who you can look to as a Latina or a woman of color in these leadership spaces or the spaces that you've aspired to be in. It sounds like you now have in your work, you now have become that go-to person, that mentor, that person who advocates, for your clients and those you serve, because you know what it feels like to not have someone there and have to build your own network. So that's what I'm hearing, and I think that that's so beautiful. How does that make you feel to be able to sort of like stand in the gap of what some individuals like yourself are missing?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is with that, and a lot of times, sometimes I don't even, to be honest with you, when I was doing it, I was like, I'm not doing anything special and I'm not doing anything out of the ordinary. But the students were like, oh my God, you don't understand. When they were coming up to me and saying, wow, you know what, you inspired me. I have students who've come back to me 10 years later saying, I met you and you helped me. You gave me a light. I saw you and I felt like I could do it because you yourself have had struggles. And that's something very important about our storytelling of how did we get to where we are today, right? And I'm a
Yes.
huge advocate of that. I share with my students and I tell them, and I don't sugarcoat things. And
Hmm.
similarly to my clients as well. Sometimes my clients do come up to me and they do tell me that they struggle based on different things, different factors, different a whole array of different
Mm,
situations and challenges that they come across. Not just representation. We're talking about educational, financial, all the whole gamut of things, right? And it's important that
mm,
us as career practitioners provide that empowerment, those resources.
mm.
And if we don't
Right.
have them, you need, as a career practitioner, we need to be resourceful, right? We need to be
Right.
able to obtain those things for our clients, our students, because at times we ourselves, and I that's how I became immensely resourceful throughout my years, because when I
Yes.
didn't know, or listen, you got to do what you got to do, and that's something that you have to lead by example. And that's one of the things that I live by. And I always tell my students, listen, you got to practice what you preach. And that's something that's very important to me in my advocacy work and my career and my mentorship. And, just the same way I tell my students, listen, I have a couple of mentors, and it's right now mentorship is more I have a lot of students coming to, can you be my mentor? And I explained to them, mentorship is not just can you be my mentor. It's a commitment. It's something that it's a two-way street, and it's very important. It's very crucial to understand that there's a whole big different world with mentorship. But it's very essential, especially to bring on representation to different companies and different associations and organizations, because that's how you actually sometimes walk in the door with your mentors.
Mm. Yes. I'm hearing so many things. I'm hearing like being resourceful, and I'm thinking about like a toolbox of things that as practitioners we have to help our clients, so that they can be, successful with their career. And so, in your space of being able to be a representation to, some of the clients who share your culture, be it Latina culture or other things that you can relate to. I'm hearing a lot of like relatability when individuals have someone that represents them in the workplace. And even as a client, they have someone they're working with as a practitioner who can relate to them, that's helpful. Someone can, mentor them. And also that you have, Blanca, like a toolbox, because I know you to be very resourceful. Then that those resources, that toolbox can help them in the areas education and other challenges on the workplace, resume building, just other various things. But to be able to have someone who, whether as a client, a career practitioner, or in the workplace, someone who's, to say, in a leadership role, to have someone who looks like you or has your same culture, where you aspire to be, they could possibly mentor you and they can relate to you. I think that that's a very powerful dynamic, right? Because there are challenges that come with being in the workplace, no matter your race or culture, et cetera. So to be able to have someone who can relate to you and, shows representation, they can like understand you and understand some of the challenges that we all go through. So I think that that's really powerful. And having like not always had this representation along the way, you had to figure some things out. You had to figure some things out as a Latina, just talk to different people who didn't look like you and figure it out along the way. So I think that that's very, very powerful and necessary. In the absence of representation, we trek along, but having it is very helpful and supportive.
Absolutely.
So yeah, anything else that you may want to add to that? Because I think that is very powerful to be able to help individuals feel supported. Right. Let's just touch on that for a little bit, because I'm hearing you felt more supported when you did connect with individuals.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. And I actually met with a woman that in higher education about 30 years ago. And she said to me, you're going to do well. You just have to find your way. However, you're always going to have to look for a godmother or a godfather. I said, "Oh, that's interesting. What does that mean?" I'm like, I have my, but basically what she was alluding to was you need to find someone to mentor you within the organizations to help you navigate the workplace, because the workplace, as you know, it can be a very challenging place, especially to some groups. It's not it's not what everybody thinks, hey, you just go to work, you do your thing, and that's it. If it was that easy, then we wouldn't be having this conversation, I'm pretty sure.
Right.
But certainly it's very important, like, in terms of in the workplace or, as career practitioner, I think we need to be able to acknowledge our own experiences like we're doing now. And I think it's important for people not to just put them under the table and, oh, no, it's just that person being the way they are. No, you need to validate what's going on. Okay. It's that, and I think that's very important because many people face these types of underrepresentation in their fields and they just don't acknowledge it. And I think that's very important as to your self-awareness in terms of acknowledging the fact of your experience. Not to say that that's going to be a deterrent, absolutely not. Quite on the contrary, it's going to be a strength because you're acknowledging the fact. Does that make sense, right? Because I mean, that's something that I always, people are like, oh, no, but you don't want to, I've heard some people say to me, you don't want to be the victim. And no one is talking about that. Absolutely no way, shape, or form. We're just saying we need to make sure that we understand where we stand and have that self-awareness of not just ourselves, but our environment, whether it's in the workplace or wherever it may be. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it sounds like, and correct me if I'm missing something, but it sounds like having a level of like multicultural competence. You said something to the effect of someone might think in the workplace that a particular person, whether it be a Black female, African American, or whether it be a Latina or any other population, they might think, oh, well, she's acting that way, or she sounds that way, or she speaks that way, and that's an issue, or what have you. But it might just be cultural. So to have, someone in the workplace that has that level of competency, that level of understanding and relatability, sounds like that's one of the benefits of having someone, like for representation, and having a career practitioner that is multiculturally competent and can, have sessions with you where you can, as a client, can explain some of your challenges to be able to help advocate for yourself and help garner the support. That's a bit of what I'm hearing. Is that kind of what you were touching on?
Absolutely. Yes. I'll give you a perfect example. When early on, when I started working in higher education, I was in a position that I was the the bilingual career counselor. And very interesting, I had a student who didn't speak English. In my office, I was talking to her in Spanish because that's the language that she knew, and I spoke it.
Yes.
And the one of the people in the office felt very underrepresented, if you will. I'm not sure if that she's
Did they feel left out, Blanca, because
yes,
they didn't
sure.
speak Spanish?
She was like, I think that's kind of rude that you're talking in Spanish to the student. And I said to her, well, how so? Because, when people have their feelings hurt or they feel like something's going on, I think it's very important to have those open, honest communication. And she was like, never mind, never mind. And I said, no, 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 we're going to talk about this because I need to address it. I said, if I made you in any way, shape, or form feel uncomfortable, I need to know. She was like, no, it's just that I don't think you should be speaking Spanish in your office with the students. And I said, but if she doesn't speak English, what other language do you want me to speak to her in? So she's like, no, I understand. I guess she went back, but I took it up a notch. I went to the to the office of, to human resources. And I asked him, is there, anything that prevents me from speaking in my language to a student that doesn't speak the language of English? And they told me, no, why is there a problem? And I said, no, I just want to make sure that I'm not violating any kind of rules or any things. And I want to make sure that everybody is okay with this. And when when I went back to the office and I told her that I had done that, she was like, oh my God, you didn't have to do that. I said, no, because, we need to be respectful. And going back to what we were saying, we need to be, respectful and have that open communication with one another, that in the fact that they're, giving her empowerment too, because she did tell me that she felt uncomfortable. And there's some people that do feel a certain way for different reasons, right? But that's why it's so important to have that open communication and given that professional courtesy, if you will, right? In terms of what's going on in the workplace, because the workplace is a jungle and so many things could be misconstrued and so many miscommunication can happen. Just out of things could be taken out of context so quickly, right? And then you dip in a little bit of culture in there. Oh boy. And it could get really, really interesting there. But that's why I think it's so very important to keep those being open-minded, right? And being respectful above it all. The communication and respect is very, very critical in the workplace.
Yes, I love that example that you provided, because among other things, it shows that you being a Latina and one who actually speaks Spanish, and in a way to help someone like yourself who speaks Spanish, you did something, seemingly helpful, to help that person to, understand, just relate, and so forth. That is like one powerful example of representation, particularly in the area of a language. Someone knows that they can speak with someone who understands them, literally understands them, not just figuratively. But at the same time, I love that you touched on the realities of the workplace, in that some individuals may not look at it like someone, helping someone who they are, like representing, if you will, by sharing that relatable culture. And maybe, looking at it in a way that they are perhaps taking some sort of offense to. And I think that the words professional courtesy are powerful. In our humanity, that might be something that some of us in our personalities and what have you may not respond in a professional way, but it is helpful for our overall success in our career, whether we stay at that particular employer or not, where that person brings up, say an issue of a language, being spoken around them. But I think it's important to think about that, whether we're someone, in a workplace and we're maybe struggling with having that representation, someone that we can speak to in our language, literally or figuratively, but along the way, just keeping in mind, that professionalism and seeking help from a career practitioner who can, help us with that while we navigate that space. So I think that is a very powerful example. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. And I think as career practitioners, we also have to also teach our clients or students to leverage their cultural background as an asset, because a lot of times, more often than not, it's viewed as a barrier, unfortunately, because based on my experience, that's what I've seen. And it's very interesting because to me, representation starts with owning your value, right? It's very critical and very important, showing up authentic, right? Being that authentic self, right? That's very, very important. And sometimes we show up the way we think our company, our employers, our supervisors, our directors want us to show up as, right? And that's very, very something that I hear more often from people. I can't show up authentically in my workspace because, well, that's not something that's actually embraced, right? It's not something that they feel comfortable doing. And that's very, very critical and very important. If you're not showing yourself, you're not valuing that your own culture, right? If you're not embracing your own culture, it's very important to do that for yourself in terms of making sure that you're leveraging that cultural background as the asset that it is. Because that diversity brings wealth. It's beautiful. To me, it's something that I think we all need to, and I think many of us do that. We do embrace it very gracefully. Unfortunately, not everybody does, right? And that's something that's why we work hard day and night in actually making sure that, whether it's in a networking or leadership position or personal branding, it's very important to show up, how we are, how we feel authentically me, right? It's very, and so there is a lot of power in being your authentic self. And that's very important in representation. Yes.
Absolutely. Whether there are others who we feel represented by in our workplace already, or if we are the only one. I think you touched on that before, and you and I have had conversations, and we have been the only one, be it the only female, be it the only person of color, be it Black, Latina, and the list goes on. So we know what it's like to be the only one, but I love that you mentioned authenticity, right? So even when we're the only one, we show up as ourselves and, get the support that we can, even if not in the workplace, but through a career practitioner or just whoever's in our support system. And we very well could be that person representing for the next person that comes, along and sees like, wow, look at Blanca. She's just a Latina rocking it. Like, I want to be like her. Like, the saying goes, we can be who we wanted for ourselves as we were growing up. I know that's something that I try to, be helpful and resourceful, as I know you're the queen of that. I try to be helpful and resourceful for, everyone and, including the people that are like me, Black, racially, Caribbean. I wish I had someone that could relate. And so I try to be that. And sometimes I might, speak my little accent. I love that you speak Spanish when, someone speaks that and they need help and you know how to speak that language. So I think it is beautiful, the diversity, the authenticity. And so I love that you touched on that. And we've already started to touch on like advice that we could give fellow career practitioners, when they're helping their clients, to feel represented. We kind of touched on that a little bit, but if you want to add some more advice. So, talking to the career practitioners out there, and their clients are coming to them. It's like, I don't feel like anybody gets me at my workplace. What's some advice you would give to those fellow career practitioners?
Well, like you said, we touched on it, but I would definitely highly encourage them to look for workplace cultural, to do their research, their due diligence in terms of helping clients, identifying companies that prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion. Ensuring that they are in those types of environments, because let's face it, and it's very interesting because a lot of people say, well, there's a lot of companies that actually say that they have these, but when you actually go and work for them, it's not really there. Because it shows very nicely on their website and then on their marketing, but it's not there. So it's important to actually do your due diligence and just checking and seeing. There are a lot of companies that actually are trying their best. I'm not saying that, they just don't do it. I mean, I think to a certain degree, there's many different schools of thoughts in terms of, oh, it's too expensive. It's this. I personally feel like if you don't have those kind of programs, it's actually very detrimental to the business itself, to the organization. And that's just not me talking. That's also data. Big data shows that, the more diversity you have, the better that your company will actually do. But going back to in terms of what I mentioned before, in terms of actually equipping them with confidence. Confidence is something that a lot, especially our younger professionals, feel like they lack because, well, I don't have that, that experience. I don't have that confidence because I'm starting. What do I do about that? Well, again, leveraging it as an asset, actually shifting that mindset that, just because I am Latina, just because I'm African American, that's a negative. Quite on the contrary, it's a positive, having a different mindset, more of a positive mindset in terms of for your culture, showing up that authentic self of yours. I've had many students throughout the years, over 20 years now, that would come into my office and say, do you think I should go with hoops to my interview? And I would say, the fact that you're asking me that, let me ask you, why do you feel you need to ask me that? No, because what if I don't get the job because I look a certain way? And another example is tattoos. Oh, should I show my tattoo? What if the company doesn't want me that way? And my answer was always pretty much similar in terms of, if that company's going to not hire you based on your look, based on what you have, then is that a company that you really want to work in? You have to do that self-assessment. That's very important and critical. Do you want, and some students would say, well, I want to get the job. Well, then if you really want it, then, I've had even women who've told me, I don't want to wear my wedding ring to my interview because I don't want them to know that I'm married. That I could come off as, someone that is in a relationship and may have things and so forth. And I'm like, again, if you're thinking that far ahead and that the company's not going to hire you because you have a ring on your finger, because you're married and because you're young and that you may have children, because that goes, let me tell you, these concerns are real. People are like, that's kind of crazy. Why would someone think that? Believe it or not, many people think, and it's important to address those, It's important to have them understand that, you're going and providing a service to this company. It's a two-way street. It's not just the company giving you this opportunity. You're working for that paycheck. It's an equal opportunity. They're giving you something, but you're also providing them your services, your work. So it's not a one way, it's a two way.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
and I tell everyone that I come across, be an advocate for change. If you are actually in a position of influencing hiring in any shape, way, or form, or of leadership development or workplace policies, ensure that you promote representation and inclusion at all levels. Because that's very, very important. It's very critical. Change happens when those in power create that space for others to thrive. Because if that space is not there, then it makes it that much more challenging. Not impossible, but challenging. Because I've
Absolutely.
seen many, many folks actually thrive in places that you'd be surprised that they're thriving in, but because they've actually had that communication, that professionalism, that authenticity, because they've actually showed up and done the work and were professionals, they're doing great. I'm not saying that happens for everybody, but certainly we can strive for that, right? And that's what I try to
Absolutely.
provide for my clients and my students. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is wonderful advice. So for our career practitioners listening, I'm hearing helping our clients to embrace their authentic selves while simultaneously being professional. But professionalism doesn't equate to dimming your light and not showing up as who you are, be it the earring choice, be it if you have tattoos or whatever else that you come to identify as or with, or whoever you are, your true self. There's no point to hide that, because at some point they're gonna find out who you are. At some point they're gonna find out that you're married, or that you speak another language, or that you wear hoop earrings, my personal favorite. So might as well be who you are. But I mean, we're chuckling and it sounds a little off, but it's true. Historically, it is such that some groups of people, in this country, and maybe arguably in the world, but in this country, United States, have not always felt that they could show up as their true selves, be it the way they wear their hair, the types of things that they can have, on and what have you. So it is very helpful for us as career practitioners to help our clients, even before they get in the door for that interview, to show up as themselves. And I think you mentioned it's like a two-way, in any relationship, whether it be romantic, platonic, an employer and employee. You want to make sure that you want this employer as much as they want you, right? So I think that those are some excellent points that you shared. And I'm just so grateful for you, Blanca, and your nuggets of wisdom. Any other things? Of course. Any other things that you want to share with the people about representation in the workplace? Such an awesome topic.
It certainly is. I mean, we could be here for days, but
right?
we don't have the time. But certainly, it's just being more compassionate with people. We don't know people's struggles. We don't know their what they've gone through, because there's a lot of people that actually suffer in silence, right? Whether it be due to mental health or traumas that they've gone through. That's my counseling camp coming on. So
Absolutely.
certainly that's something that is very important to understand. Just being human, being authentic, being compassionate, having that communication is so critical in any and every level. And I think that's important because in any especially more so in representation. I think that that's something that sometimes people take for granted. And it's something that we need to definitely be more compassionate with.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, you know what? You've heard it here, listeners. Miss Blanca Rosales-Ahn on the topic of representation in the workplace. And I'm LaChish J. Rigg, and this is our conversation. We're so happy to have you tune in.
Thank you.